Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
This episode is brought to you by Polestar. There's only one true way to experience the all-electric luxury SUV Polestar 3, and that's to take a test drive. It can go from 0 to 60 in as little as 4.8 seconds with the dynamic handling of a sports car. But to truly understand how it commands the road, you need to be behind the wheel. Up to 350 miles of range, the 3D surround sound system by Bowers & Wilkins. It's all something you have to experience to believe. So book your test drive for Polestar 3 today at polestar.com.
Programming note. Now that we are starting a new front, you might want to go back and listen to episode 403, the Battle of El Alamein Ridge. But just in case you don't, let me explain. No, let me sum up. Hello, and thank you for listening to The History of World War II podcast, episode 549, Never Fear, Monty is here. With Operation Pedestal over by mid-August 1942, though not perfect, Malta now had enough supplies and defenses to continue on, serving as a base to harass supplies being sent to Rommel. For the Allies, as the intended new commander of 8th Army, Lieutenant General William Gott, had been shot down by Luftwaffe fighters on August 7th, Lieutenant General Bernard Monty Montgomery was brought in. He was not the only new guy. Churchill, tired of C&C Auchinleck, had replaced him with General Harold Alexander, who had been C&C of Allied land forces in Burma. And Rommel, being Rommel, saw an opportunity. What with these changes and knowing that the enemy was still receiving reinforcements, attacked in late August. And again, his main attack came from the south. Monty guessed as much and thus set up a trap, and though it did not go exactly as planned, Rommel's panzers were checked. 8th Army still held the ground of battle, and in mid-September, Rommel, suffering from liver infection and low blood pressure, was flown out to be temporarily replaced by General George Stumm. Yet it must be made clear that the Allied plan for the Battle of El Alamein Ridge was not, in fact, Monty's, though he did carry it out. The general thrust of how to stop Rommel this time was conceived by Major General Eric Dorman Smith, Auchinleck's chief of staff, and this plan was signed off by the C&C. Again, Monty carried them out, and near the end of it, he almost gave in to temptation to send his 8th Army on a general offensive, but his cautious temperament would not allow this. While trying not to go overboard on the "don't meet your heroes" warning, Monty did not have friends. Well, many friends. He had had a cruel and abusive childhood and was himself cruel and abusive. He did have flair in command during a battle, yes, but he knew his limits and thus planned things out and always strove to have more than his opponent. As for the off-the-cuff maneuvering during battle, that was not Monty's strength. No, he would come at you with more. He would have a plan in place and basically be a bulldozer. Not that that is not effective. Or as one colleague put it, he would use a sledgehammer to open a walnut. One suspects that the sledgehammer was to guarantee success, but also to teach the walnut a lesson. And given how the war here in North Africa and in the Mediterranean played out, Monty would have more than his opponent, much more. Since the end of the Battle of El Alamein Ridge, September 5th, and after the war, Monty has been criticized for this moment, for not loading up on fuel and just driving Afrika Korps out of the area, and thus ending the North African campaign. But this man had read about the fighting since Operation Compass and was not going to repeat mistakes. Namely, Rommel would attack, lose too many panzers, then run away to be chased pell-mell, but then use the Allies' haste to set a trap with his, Rommel's, anti-tank guns, which is when he would turn around and head east again. No, Monty, taking this local victory, would continue to build up his forces and then move forward. To take territory, to then lose it, to then have to take it again, was not the Monty way. Besides, the Axis forces had not retreated that far away after pulling themselves out of Monty's trap. They just sat there just west of El Alamein, itself only 60 miles away from Alexandria, on the other side of the Allied minefields. The question for Monty now was, what would Stumm do while he, Monty, built up his forces further? It helped, of course, that Monty could read Stumm's mail, while the reverse was no longer true. In July, the 9th Australian Division had captured the German 621st Signal Battalion, and it was confirmed they were reading Colonel Bonnerfeller's messages, the U.S. military attaché in Cairo. This was switched up, but Monty still had ultra and local sources, as the British, in one form or another, had been in North Africa for decades. As we have seen, both sides now just stared at each other across El Alamein. Monty because he was still building up his strength, and Stumm because, well, basically because he wasn't Rommel, just a placeholder. But in a not-so-ironic twist, as Rommel had just been fought to a standstill by early September and was now in a medical facility, and Operation Pedestal guaranteed Malta's further participation, the North African campaign was over. It was decided. It was just a matter of going through the motions. Oh, bloody motions, to be sure, full of death and destruction. But the Africa Corps would receive less and less. Monty, more. And by this point, the Americans had decided that North Africa is where they would jump into the fray, landing American and British troops far to the west of El Alamein. All those who had fought and commanded in North Africa previous, even imperfectly, had made this moment possible. So Monty was gathering his forces, which were growing, but unlike the others before him, Monty knew how to sell himself to his men and to Churchill. As training continued, Monty went around to his men, talking to them, bucking up their spirits. For Churchill's ears, Monty put out a public statement that there would be no retreat. Not this time. Not unless he was dead and his men. Of course, there had been no talk of a pullback. The plans for a second El Alamein battle were already broadly worked out. For now, not unlike MacArthur, the local Army public relations staff put a spotlight on Monty, and it rarely moved. It made for riveting and inspiring news, and that was the point. Monty's other moves were to change out some of the high-ranking officers just below him. In less than a noble gesture, General William Ramsden, commander of 30th Corps, was out, replaced by Sir Oliver Leese, who got the orders to head to Cairo from the home island. Next, Monty announced that what was good enough for Rommel was good enough for the 8th Army. Thus, he was going to create a Corps de Chasse, a mobile and armed force. Problem was, there had been one of these since at least General Richard O'Connor. His force had been the 7th Armored Division. General Norrie, after him, had his own mobile force, 30th Corps. But Monty's was different in that it would have 2 additional armored divisions and fresh infantry divisions, basically a 3rd Corps, the 10th Corps, of the 1st, 8th, and 10th Armored Divisions. Again, timing is everything, and Monty came to North Africa at a time when Britain was fully mobilized. Having said that, Monty was a fighter and a self-promoter, but Churchill would suffer the latter as long as the former was true.
With a Venmo debit card, you can Venmo more than just your friends. You can use your balance in so many ways. You can Venmo everything. Need gas? You can Venmo this. How about snacks? You can Venmo that. Your favorite band's merch? You can Venmo this. Or their next show? You can Venmo that. Visit venmo.me/debit to learn more.
You can Venmo this, or you can Venmo that. You can Venmo this, or you can Venmo that. You can Venmo.
The Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A. pursuant to license by MasterCard International Incorporated. Card may be used everywhere MasterCard is accepted. Venmo purchase restrictions apply.
Even Monty's decision to do something different than make the main attack at the southern end and drive north of center was not new. General Ramsden, formerly of the 30th Corps, had developed such a plan, so ordered by Auchinleck, and Monty was aware of the details. But when he announced it with his dash and confidence, the story of Monty and El Alamein began here. The point about Monty has been made, but it has to be said that he put his own spin on the coming battle. The men were trained over and over, having the details of the attack pounded into their head because that is what Monty demanded. But being new to the desert, Monty did not want to stray too far from the coast, which is normal for a man new to the desert. The old desert hands around him made suggestions, but Monty shut them down, and his men would suffer for this. Of course, what would save Monty, guaranteeing him success at some level at the very least, was the landings of Torch. And Monty, with C&C Alexander, knew the date of Torch. And as Monty expected the second Battle of El Alamein to last 12 days, he would attack on the D-Day of Torch minus 13. That is to say, 13 days before Torch. Yes, Rommel would fight. He would have no choice. But in the end, again, thanks to Torch, he would have to retreat, making himself vulnerable. Churchill had wanted Monty to attack even sooner for political reasons, but Monty stuck to his schedule, and Alexander backed Monty. Still, the stage was set, and as the day of battle drew closer, Monty became more confident. Churchill gave him everything he could, except advice. Ironically, as the Prime Minister had harangued all of the other commanders before Monty. And Monty, while explaining the details of the attack to his colonels, thus setting a tone, imbued them with his confidence, his swagger, and this was passed on to the men. And in this regard, there was no one better than Monty. During the night of October 22nd, 23rd, the British troops moved into position. Now beyond the British front lines, the men waited. For a bright moon was soon to rise to help them with nighttime operations and, frankly, minimize friendly fire. Unlike times past, there were no and would be no German reconnaissance flights to spy out this move. Those days were over. As the night moved on, Monty sent a last message to his men. Quote, "The battle which is now about to begin will be one of the decisive battles of history. It will be the turning point of the war." At 9:40 p.m., just over 1,000 Allied guns started to bark, sending high-explosive shells at the Axis line. The Germans did not respond. Stumm told his gunners to conserve their shells as they were running low. They had even less fuel for their tanks. Such had been the supply battle that had gone on the Mediterranean Sea. 20 minutes later, Monty's guns stopped. Then, 70,000 men and 600 tanks charged at the 12,000 Italian and Germans of the Trento and 164th Infantry Divisions on the British right flank, for that is where he would strike. This was Operation Lightfoot, the infantry attack of the opening move of the Second Battle of El Alamein. And yet, when first sunlight came, there had been no great smashing of the Axis line here. The Allied troops, with tanks behind them, were too bunched up to properly maneuver. The German defensive zone still held, and Monty's engineers had yet to clear lines through the 5 miles of minefields for the attacking armor to dash through. No, Monty's infantry were bunched up, the tanks behind them the same. which is when the Axis guns started firing. The infantry attack that was to clear lanes and reach the Axis second line of defense was stalled. To the south, the diversionary attack of Horrocks' command, the 13th Corps, had failed. The 7th Armored and 44th Divisions could not get through the two lines of German minefields. The first had been penetrated, but the Germans had scattered other mines in between these two lines, thus stymieing the Allied attack here. Nor would the 13th Corps advance any further that day. That day was spent by them and the right flank to the north being hit by accurate German shelling.
This message is brought to you by Abercrombie & Fitch. I've been ready for summer for a while, and now it's finally time for summer outfits. With the trip coming up, the A&F Vacation Shop has me covered. Abercrombie really knows how to do a lightweight outfit. Their tees, sweater polos, and linen blend shorts never miss. I wear Abercrombie denim year-round. Their shorts are no different and have the comfort I need for summer. Prep for your next trip with the A&F Vacation Shop. Get their newest arrivals in-store, online, and in the app.
Though there was one German casualty that day of significance. General Stumm had a heart attack when the attack came. But that is just the end of the story. With the British attack underway, Stumm went to the front in his car with no escort. With him was Colonel Andres Bucking, his chief signals officer. Coming closer to the command post, suddenly shots rang out. His car was under attack. Stumm quickly looked around. Bucking was dead, a wound to his head. Stumm got out of the car but hung on to its side while his driver tried to get away. Eventually, the car got out of range of the guns and the driver stopped. But Stumm was no longer clinging to the side. The driver looked around for him, eventually coming upon the dead commander, who had no visible wounds on his body. With his high blood pressure, it was assumed he died of a heart attack. Not that it mattered in the moment. Now in command was General Wilhelm von Thoma, commander of the Afrika Corps, a veteran of the Battle of Moscow. He had survived there. He hoped to repeat that here. But help was on the way. Rommel, still ailing, though ailing, was, before the 24th was out, flying back to North Africa. He would, once again, lead his men in battle. Postscript. As much as one may and should admire the British and their Commonwealth forces for their stalwart performance from 1940 to November of 1942, putting aside the Eastern Front for the moment, there is the question of why the Second El Alamein battle was fought at all. The torch landings would have forced the Afrika Corps to go back far to the west without a shot being fired by 8th Army. If anything, Monty should have attacked once the Germans and Italians, about 90,000 unmotorized infantry and 200 tanks, left their defensive positions at El Alamein to retreat. Monty could have attacked then. After all, he had command of the air, just over 200,000 men, completely mechanized, and over 1,000 tanks. The answer is straightforward enough and has two parts. One, with Churchill and Monty in the driver's seat, there was going to be a battle. And two, it was to be the last great British victory before they became the junior partners. And they knew that, with all due respect. Still, for the coming British casualties of this battle, just over 13,000 in total, and the loss of hundreds of tanks, the question of why there was a battle is a legitimate one. Greetings, everyone, from Central Virginia. So here we are. What it is I realized we didn't quite get North Africa up to torch, so I got to fill that little gap, and then we'll bring in the GIs and see how all that took place. So anyways, so that's why I'm doing this. As far as, let's see here, I don't have any new members, but I do have one donation. I would like to thank very much Douglas Savage, which is a cool freaking name, or the hiker, as his friends call him. I refer to him as the man from Richmond, Virginia. So basically, He's my brother. Anyway, so thank you very much, Douglas. It is greatly appreciated. So what we'll do is, we'll go into detail on the second Battle of El Alamein. Obviously, this makes Monty an international figure. We'll go from there. We'll see the Americans land, and then we'll get rid of the Axis forces in North Africa, jump to Sicily, and then again see how it goes. And at some point, jump back to the Pacific to catch that up. But this is going to sound whatever, but I already miss the Eastern Front. Is that weird? I don't know. It sounds weird to me, but no, it was an amazing, epic story. There should be a Klingon opera, if you know what I'm saying. Anyway, so I missed that already, but we got to catch this up so we can see the Americans the Western powers get a toehold on mainland Europe, and then we'll see which way the wind takes us. Take care, everyone.